Greetings and salutations, test takers. This is Dean Tenney coming to you from my studio in fabulous Las Vegas with a new lecture. It's a request. We honor lecture requests. So if you have a topic you'd like covered and you don't find something on the channel and you'd like me to add it, just send that request my way and it'll magically appear at some point when we get around to it. So today's lecture request is on variable annuities. This is testable on the SIE exam, the Series 6 exam, the Series 7 exam, the Series 65 exam, and the 66. So accordingly, I will put it in each of those playlists for you. So let's get started in this carve out. I call it carve out because one of our smaller lectures on the channel, as you know, as a viewer or subscriber, we have, long form content that goes up to a couple hours if it's a practice exam explication, as little as, 4 or 5 minutes if it's a question. And we'll see what we can bring this one in at. All right, so let's get started. So fixed annuities are not securities. And what you want to be able to do as a test taker is be able to contrast a fixed annuity with a variable annuity. A fixed annuity. So you say, well, gee, if it's not a security, why is it on a securities exam? Well, it's just to serve as the contrasting point to what a variable annuity is. So in a fixed annuity, the insurance company says, hey, why don't you give us a lump sum of money and we will turn it into an income stream. We'll start sending you checks, income streams. And you say, well, gee, Dean, how are they going to do that? I said, well, they're going to take whatever you deposit or invested and they're going to put it in their general account and they're going to make investments. The insurance company is going to buy stocks and bonds and real estate, and they're going to hope to make more than they promised you. But at the end of the day, the insurance company is assuming the investment risk. And by the way, whenever you hear the word guarantee, we're primarily talking about a banking product or an insurance product because, banking products, the bank assumes the investment risk at a CD, for example, right? They take your deposit, they make investments. So this is a kind of a key word. It's a hint that it's not a securities products because, when it comes to securities products, we're not supposed to use the word guarantee, right? Somebody says, is my capital at risk? I say, absolutely. And the investment risk is assumed by the insurance company. Now, they're going to pay you an income stream for the rest of your life. The actuarial tables, you outlive them. Well, that's the risk that they're willing to assume. This is called the law of large numbers or averages. And again, don't get too wrapped up in something that the actuaries are doing at an insurance company. That's not your job. You're an intermediary, so to speak, between the insurance company and the client. But anyways, that's a kind of a nifty thing, right? To have an income stream that you can outlive. Now, let's say that as a customer, you say, Dean, I figured out what they've been doing with my money. I said, well, I think I told you what they're doing with your money. They're putting it in their general account and they're making investments. And you say, yeah, I think they're making more than they promised me. I said, well, so are you willing to assume the investment risk? Because if so, instead of putting your money into the general account, we'll put it in a separate account or a sub account, which is a mutual fund. And you, test question, can assume the investment risk. Now, as you can see here in the title of my slide, I think you'd be doing yourself a great service if every time you hear the word variable annuity on your exam, you translate mutual fund with an insurance wrapper. Mutual fund with an insurance wrapper. Now, when you annuitize, once again, the insurance company will agree to pay you an income stream that perhaps you can't outlive. It could be you and joint survivor. We'll talk about that later as a test issue. Securities and insurance registrations are required to sell. So that's testable. We can't, do business with people who aren't properly registered. And, when you get properly registered, most of you are going to have a securities and an insurance registration. There's going to be some traditional insurance agents, big producers perhaps, been doing it for a long time. And they come to you and they say, hey, I don't want to have to go get my 6 or my 7. And I have a customer who wants a variable annuity. Why don't I just do the paperwork? We'll put your rep number on it. And I'll pay you, it's an $8,000 commission. I'll give you a couple $1,000 for using your rep number. Absolutely not. Right. So, anybody who's selling these products have to be properly registered. Even outside of this product, you can't split commissions with people who aren't properly registered. All right. Once you annuitize, you're going to get a monthly payment that is based on the year or the assumed interest rate. We'll talk about that as a test issue as well. So contrasting a variable annuity with a traditional insurance product. Let me just clean up my slide here. Yeah, I'm all about these slides where we compare and contrast things. So as you see here, variable annuities, the maximum return has no maximum. In a fixed annuity, the current interest rate is set by the insurance company, whatever they agree to pay you. Minimum return, there is no minimum, and you have a guaranteed minimum in a fixed annuity. The risk to the purchaser in a variable annuity is the investment risk. Fixed annuities don't do well in an inflationary environment. Now, variable annuities, I'm not saying are an inflation hedge by any means, but I say a variable annuity has a better chance of doing better than a fixed annuity. So again, don't try and compare a variable annuity with a TIP or common stocks. That's not the point. It's exclusively a comparison with the fixed annuity. And remember, the variable annuity is a security because it has that underlying separate account, sub-account mutual fund. Now, I've made a note down here at the bottom for you. I don't know where you're at in your testing journey, but on your 65 and 66, you can get asked about what's called an equity indexed annuity. This is only on the 65 and the 66. And on that, it's not a security because there's no negative reset. So in this equity indexed annuity, like a fixed annuity, the insurance company is not guaranteeing an interest rate. They're guaranteeing you a return based on the referenced index. So for example, if it's a referenced index is the S&P 500, if the S&P 500 goes up 40% and you had 100,000, it would be 140 would be the reset. We do that annually. And, there could be a max participation rate. But if the market goes down, there is no negative reset. It doesn't go backwards. And that is the reason it is not considered a security. And I would certainly know that in your 65, 66 exam. You won't have to deal that with the other exams, but on 65, 66, you most certainly do. I mean, very high probability is a test issue on 65, 66. All right, let me clean up my slide. Another thing you want to be able to do on your exam, all the exams, again, very testable, is contrast what's called a tax-deferred annuity with a tax-sheltered annuity. They are different things. A tax-deferred annuity is the variable annuity we're discussing. And a tax-deferred annuity, anyone is eligible. You're funding in a tax-deferred annuity with after-tax money. Now, as a test taker, on the test, when you hear the word non-qualified, that's what that means. For us, that means this is money that is after tax, money you've already paid taxes on. Whereas qualified means pre-tax money you've never paid taxes on. So, for example, if we invest $100,000, and I'll just make up a number here, and let's put it in green. You say, hey, Dean, I'm going to put $100,000 into this variable annuity. I go, wonderful. That is $100,000 you've already paid taxes on, and that is going to be your cost basis. Cost basis is simply when you turn the money into an investment. That's what that word means, right? So, for example, if I buy 1,000 shares of Apple today at 132, my cost basis is $132,000 or $130 a share, $32 a share. It's simply when I put that into it. Now, in a tax-deferred annuity, you must reinvest the dividends and capital gains. You must reinvest. In a regular mutual fund, if you participate in the mutual fund's dividend reinvestment program. So I tell the mutual fund, hey, listen, I don't need the capital gains distributions. I don't need the dividends. Just buy me additional fund shares. It's called a dividend reinvestment program where we're telling the issuer, in this case, a mutual fund, to reinvest. And the IRS says, well, Dean, even though you told the mutual fund to reinvest or the issuer, you could have had that money, and that's the same as getting that. So that's called constructive receipt. Constructive receipt is the idea that in a regular mutual fund, I could have received capital gains and dividends, chose not to, and so I still owe taxes on that. Now, in a tax-deferred annuity, I have no choice about what's going to happen. They said, Dean, did you ever get a choice about what to do? I said, no, I never got constructive receipt. They made me reinvest. They made me reinvest. So you're not getting, that sounds like a bad thing, but that's actually a good thing that you don't have access to those monies, because that's why, like other retirement plans, we're going to have tax-deferred growth, right? That's why we also refer to this as a non-qualified retirement plan. A non-qualified after tax, like a mutual fund, it's growing tax, or like a retirement plan, excuse me, it's growing tax deferred. Now, make sure as a test taker, you're clear about what kind of annuity they're asking you about. It's very testable to know who is eligible for a tax sheltered annuity, not a tax deferred annuity, not a TDA, a TSA. And this is not for everybody. Not everybody is going to get to use pre-tax money to fund their, their annuity. So to be eligible for this, very testable on all exams, you have to be an employee of a 403B educational institution or a 501c charitable organization. So educational would mean teachers. Remember, it's not just the teachers, it's janitors, it's nurses. And if it's like a charitable hospital, nonprofit hospital, it's not just the doctors, it's doctors, the nurses, the janitors. It's people who work there. Now, be careful, don't fall for a trick. It's not the students at the educational institution, and it's not the patients at the hospital, right? It's the employees. And here you're using pre-tax money I've never paid taxes on. So in my example, there's $100,000 in this. I put $100,000 into this tax sheltered annuity. That is $100,000 pre-tax. That is money I've never paid taxes on. And so that means my cost base is going to be zero, right? Because this was over here was after tax money. And this over here is pre-tax. So boom. None of the investment has ever been taxed. None of the money in there has ever been taxed. And so you have a zero cost base. So again, make sure you can contrast a TDA with a TSA. Be different. Now, when we annuitize, by the way, that means if it's a TSA, everything coming out is taxable. In a TDA, tax deferred annuity, there's going to be what we call the exclusion ratio. Some of it will be taxed and some of it will not. So funding the annuity, purchasing annuity. For the test, most the test is concerned with, or the most common version of this on the test, is where we're buying accumulation units. Again, I don't think that you would be in any trouble, again, if you just thought of those accumulation units as shares. So to say I have 6,000 accumulation units in a separate account, intellectually is pretty similar to saying I have 6,000 shares in a mutual fund, right? So a lot of times people get hung up on variable annuity questions because they think they're, being asked about something different. They have more in common than they have differences. And a lot of times these questions are camouflage mutual fund questions. For example, how often do we calculate the value of an accumulation unit? Every business day, right? What makes the accumulation go up or down? The value of the performance of the separate account, that kind of thing. If you have an immediate annuity, you're buying annuity units, not accumulation units. And when we annuitize the annuity, we're going to turn those accumulation units into what are called annuity units. Again, I wouldn't get hung up on that. So if we're making periodic payments, we're feeding this thing. Again, the premium buys accumulation units. Now, a trick, it makes no sense for you to be putting money in at the same time you're taking money out, right? So we don't have a version of this where you're making periodic payments into the annuity while you're getting periodic payments out. So periodic payment immediate annuity is not possible. Well, these are pretty expensive products. And the reason they're expensive, right, is because you have the expense structure of both the insurance component, the insurance wrapper, as well as the expense structure of the mutual fund, the separate account or sub account. And so these are typically pretty expensive as related to, as compared to like buying a term life policy and buying a mutual fund, for example. I'm not getting into the controversy of whether that's a good idea or not. I'm just saying on the test, we should be conscious of that the sales charges should be reasonable and not excessive. And then we should make sure we explain to the customer what would happen in terms of a contingent deferred sales charge if they get out early, right? There could be an exit fee, so to speak. So on your exam, I would expect this is an A, B, C, D kind of a question. And what they like to ask you is what would generate the largest monthly check for a customer? And so test question answer, I say, well, If you tell the insurance company that you only want to be paid for your life and your life only, that will get you the largest monthly check. And as a test taker, I would certainly know that. The separate account, as I mentioned, is a mutual fund. So my advice to you is every time you see variable annuity as a test taker, say mutual fund with insurance wrapper, right? Because that separate account is a mutual fund. And when you're paying into the separate account, you're buying accumulation units. And the number of accumulation units remains the same if you don't make additional purchases. It says the accumulation unit valuation is very similar to mutual fund. It's similar because it's the same damn thing, basically. Now, when you go to pay out, right? So you put money into the variable annuity, and now you're taking money out. So, you're funding this thing. And then when you annuitize, remember they have a contractual obligation to you, the insurance company, to turn this into an income stream that you can't outlive if you choose life only, for example. As I mentioned, when we annuitize, we're turning the accumulation units into annuity units. And that's going to be a fixed number of annuity units. That's not going to change once we do that. Now, your payout, again, this is actuaries that are going to do this, depends on the sex. For example, if you're a guy, you're going to get a larger monthly check than a lady. Why? Because the actuarial tables say that the guys will die sooner, and the insurance company will have large numbers. Averages know that. The account value, how much you have in there, your age, if you wait to annuitize, you can annuitize when you're 59 and a half, but if you wait till you're 65, you'll get more than if you annuitize at 59 and a half. The payout option you selected, and the return of that separate account or sub-account, that mutual fund that the money has been invested in. So the assumed interest rate versus the investment return is going to cause your check to go up or down. And we do have to explain to the customer why the check is going up or down. So I say, listen, when you get your first check, give me a call, because I'd like to talk to you about how this works. So, we turn this into an income stream. And you call me, say, hey, Dean, I got my first check. And my first check, it was $1,000. And I say, wonderful. So that's your first monthly check. And I say, listen, in month 2, your check is going to be either $1,000, it's going to be more than $1,000, or it's going to be less than $1,000. If we get more than the assumed interest rate, the check goes up. If we get less than the assumed interest rate, the check goes down. And if we get the assumed interest, it remains the same. And he goes, well, I got it. I go, I found nobody gets it. So let's just talk every month. You get a check until, we figure this out. You say, well, Dean, what's the assumed interest rate? I said, I don't want to tell you. It will just cloud your mind. It has nothing to do with answering the question on the test, and it has nothing to do with the customer. And you say, well, damn it, Dean, I want to know. I said, well, okay, I'm going to tell you. I'll probably regret it, but the assumed interest rate is 4%. Now, we won't be an insurance company long if we make assumptions, math assumptions that we're wrong about, right? As I said, the insurance company there are insurance companies that have serious math geeks called actuaries. And so we do better than 4%, the check goes up. So you call me, you say, hey, Dean, I just got my second check and it was $1,020. And I say, okay, so it was $1,020. That means we did better than the air. You go, well, how much better than the 4%? I said, I don't want to tell you because it would just cloud your mind. It has nothing to do with answering the test question or helping the client out in both the series, the test fantasy land or in the real world. And he goes, well, I want to know. I said, well, listen, it doesn't matter if I tell you 4.1 or 20. All that matters is if we get more than 4%, the check goes up. I want to know. I said, okay, I'll tell you 5%. But it doesn't matter whether I told you 5% or 4.1 or 20, it doesn't matter. Just a simple comparison. Did we do better? Did we do better than the air, right, of that 4%? All right, you say, well, I think I got it. I say, nobody ever gets it until the check goes down. So let's just keep talking until we get a check that does not go down. You say, Dean, I got my third check, and my third check was the same as my second check. My check was the same. I said, well, that means we got 4%. If we get the assumed interest rate, then the check just stays the same. And you say, well, I think I got it. And I said, well, As I said, let's just keep having this conversation until you get it. And then I have found that clients don't get it until the check goes down. You say, Dean, I just got my fourth check and it's 1,000. I say, well, that means we got less in the air. You say, how much less? I said, I don't want to tell you. Just cloud your mind. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if this is -5 or 3.9. Does not matter. All that matters is if it's less than 4. Now, by the way, remember the law of large averages. 3.9 would still be positive performance. And let's say it was 3.9. I had to say the 3.9. That's still positive performance, but 3.9 is not, it's less than 4. So check goes down. Now, the law of large numbers, averages, says this will work out based on this. Now, notice I'm not bumping you all over the place. I'm not taking the check from like 1,000 to 500 to 2,000. We're typically going to bump you one annuity unit at a time, so to speak. So, we're not going to be bouncing the guy in retirement all over the place here. Taxation. So taxation of non-qualified annuities. Now, remember, that's key for us as a test taker, because non-qualified, remember, means we're using after-tax money. If this was a qualified TSA, tax-sheltered annuity, everything coming out would be taxable. So, in my example earlier in our little carve-out presentation, I told you that we put $100,000 into this non-qualified retirement plan known as a variable annuity. And so we said that was money that I'd already paid taxes on. And so that was my cost basis. And so now let's say that I'm 59 and a half, depending how old you were, let's say, doesn't matter, how old you were, but now you're 59 and a half. And now let's say there's $1 million in the separate account. And the mutual fund or separate account or sub account. And so you say, hey, Dean, send me the $100,000 I originally put in there. So one thing you could do is random withdrawal. Here, where you do a lump sum, and I send you the $1 million. That means you say, Dean, just send me everything in the separate account. So, we send you the $1 million. You're going to owe ordinary income tax rates on $900,000. That is testable. No, this is going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rate. So, the advantage of a mutual fund is you've held it for more than a year, maybe you get a long-term capital gain. But here, no, everything coming out is going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. If it's before 59 and a half, like other retirement plans, you would have a 10% penalty. So, in retirement plans, when you take money out, it's taxed at ordinary income. We're referring to this as a non-qualified retirement plan. P.S. If you annuitize and turn it into a check, 10% would be what we call the exclusion ratio, right? So if I turn this into a check for you, 10% is money you're not going to have to pay taxes on because that's money you already paid taxes on, right? So that's called the exclusion ratio. I'll show that to you in just a bit in a separate slide. So very testable to know last in, first out. So very testable to know last in, first out. When you get stuck on a tax question, what you should do is answer whatever yields the most to the U.S. Treasury. So as you recall, we have $100,000 in this variable annuity. That was what we funded. That was our cost base, our cost basis. And now we have $1 million that's grown tax deferred. And so you say, Dean, send me a check of the $100,000 I originally paid taxes on. No, I say, listen, if I send you a random distribution of 100, the IRS assumes that's $100,000 you have not paid taxes on. Very testable. Last money's in, our first money's out. That's whatever yields the most to the U.S. Treasury. There's a 10% penalty. We talked about it. If you annuitize. So remember, I told you, let's turn it into a check. And I had a customer who had $1,000 check. He annuitized, he was getting $1,000. And 100 of that, remember 10%. How am I getting the 10%? 100,000 of the million, right? So 10% of that, $100 is the excluded. You're not going to pay taxes on that. you're going to be paying taxes on the $900, right? So 10% of that, $100 is a return of your original money you paid taxes on. And then what you're going to owe taxes on is on the $900. So the exclusion ratio in this example is 10%. Annuity death benefits. If the annuitant dies during the accumulation period, the annuity is included in the total value of the estate. And the proceeds to the beneficiary in excess of the cost basis, in this example, 100 grand, are taxable as income. We talked about that. The age is 59.5. That's for all the retirement plans, right? So shouldn't be struggling with that. Suitability. So this shouldn't be a recommendation you would make unless the customer has funded all their other available retirement plans. That would be their 401k through their employer or their IRAs, and that's all done. They still have a large amount of money that they want to put aside for retirement. Well, then we go to the variable annuity as a potential arrow in our quiver. The customer has been informed of the various features of defined deferred variable annuities, including the surrender charges, and the customer would benefit from certain features. The biggest thing that gives this thing the juice that it has is this idea of tax deferred growth and lifetime income, right? So, and then the understanding of all the individual components. Again, the big one being they're assuming investment risk in that separate account, that mutual fund. And then as a whole, this is a suitable recommendation. So, I have people who tell me that they have platforms where they enter the investment and they hit send and it automatically does the rest of the work and paperwork and everything. And they tell me that in their platform, when they put in a variable annuity and hit enter, it locks up and says call compliance, right? So, I guess compliance wants to kind of chat with you before, you carry through on this recommendation, just to make sure everything's hunky-dory, so to speak. Okay, well, I hope you found that helpful. Remember, inch by inch, your exam is a cinch. Yard by yard, your exam is hard. Give me any recommendations you have for future lectures, and like I say, try and mix it up a little bit. I think we came in at a little under 30 minutes, so that's not bad for variable annuities. And I'll put this in the appropriate playlist, which is, remember, this is testable on your SIE, your 6, your 7, your 65, and your 66. All right, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.